Welcome back to Brick by Brick, DC Real Estate Intelligence, the DC Real Estate Podcast where we break down what's actually happening in the market, in your neighborhood, and at the policy level. I'm Eddie Calloway, licensed realtor in DC and Maryland, and every month I bring you a practical, ground-level look at what's moving, what's building, and what you need to know if you own, rent, invest, or are thinking about buying in Washington, DC. This show is built around one idea: preparation over prediction. No hype, no hot takes, just consistent market intelligence designed to help you better understand how this city is changing. Each month we start with the macro view, the big picture numbers across the DC market, and then we zoom into one specific zip code for a deeper neighborhood breakdown. This month's spotlight is 20,001, covering neighborhoods including Shaw, Columbia Heights, U Street, LaDroit Park, Bloomingdale, Truxtun Circle, and parts of downtown DC. This is the June 2026 edition, and we're reviewing May 2026 market data. So everything you're about to hear reflects what actually happened in the market last month. Let's get into it. We're going to start with the macro view, all of Washington, DC. The headline number, the median sold price across DC reached $740,000 in May, up more than 11% from April. That's a meaningful jump and another sign that demand remains resilient despite higher borrowing costs and ongoing economic uncertainty. On the valuation side, the median estimated property value across the city sits just under $595,000. That's essentially unchanged from a year ago, suggesting prices are stabilizing rather than making dramatic moves in either direction. For a full breakdown of the numbers, take a look at the graphic on screen. So what does this tell us? First, inventory has improved compared to the tightest selling markets years, but is still not creating major leverage for buyers. At 5.59 months of inventory, DC remains in balanced market territory. Second, buyers are still acting decisively when the right property hits the market. Homes are spending a median of just 14 days on market, and buyers are paying nearly full asking price on average. And third, pricing remains remarkably durable. The combination of rising sold prices, stable property values, and strong sold-to-list ratios tells us demand hasn't disappeared. Buyers may be more selective than they were a few years ago, but they're still competing for quality inventory. Bottom line, DC remains a balanced market. Supply has improved, buyers have more options than they did during the pandemic-era frenzy, but well-positioned homes continue to attract attention and command strong pricing. That's the citywide picture. Now let's bring it down to the neighborhood level and take a closer look at this month's spotlight zip code, 20,001. What makes 20,001 interesting is its diversity. Within a relatively small geographic area, you have historic row home blocks, luxury condos, affordable housing, major development activity, and some of the city's strongest restaurant and entertainment corridors. The headline number this month, the median sold price reached $805,000 in May, up more than 7% from April, and well above the citywide median. Buyers continue placing a premium on location, walkability, and access to amenities throughout the zip code. At the same time, inventory sits at 7.53 months, and median days on market increased to 32 days. That tells us buyers have more choices here than they do in many other parts of the city, even as pricing remains relatively strong. You'll find the full set of neighborhood metrics displayed on the graphic. So what are we seeing on the ground? Active inventory in 20,001 spans a wide range of price points, from entry-level condos to luxury row homes and penthouses. The median active list price currently sits around $650,000, and inventory levels remain elevated compared to many other DC neighborhoods. What's notable isn't any one listing, it's the breadth of options available to buyers. Whether you're looking for a first condo, a renovated row home, or a larger luxury property, there's meaningful inventory available across multiple price points. The rental market tells a similar story. Inventory ranges from smaller one-bedroom apartments to larger row homes and luxury units, giving renters a variety of options throughout the zip code. Pending activity provides a clear picture of where buyers are actually committing. The median pending price sits around $735,000, suggesting buyers continue targeting well-positioned properties in the mid to upper price ranges. Pending activity remains strongest among updated homes, renovated row homes, and move-in ready properties located near transit, retail, and neighborhood amenities. Even with inventory levels rising, quality listings are still finding buyers. Closed sales in May ranged from more affordable condo product all the way into the luxury row home segment, reinforcing how diverse the housing stock is throughout 2001. One notable trend is that buyers continue paying very close to asking price, with the sold to list ratio sitting at 99%. The median sold price climbed to $805,000, reflecting continued demand for properties in the neighborhood despite a more balanced supply environment. So the overall takeaway for 2001 is this. This isn't a market defined by scarcity anymore. Buyers have options, but demand remains healthy, pricing remains resilient, and well-positioned properties continue to attract attention. That's a sign of a neighborhood moving toward balance rather than decline. And when you combine that market activity with ongoing development, infrastructure investment, and a strong neighborhood identity, it's easy to see why 2001 continues to be one of the district's most closely watched residential markets. But market activity is only one part of the story. To understand where a neighborhood is headed, you also have to understand the decisions being made at the community level. That's where the Advisory Neighborhood Commission come in. Before we get into it, some context. Zip code 20001 falls primarily within A&C districts 1B, 1C, 2C, and 5E, covering neighborhoods like Shaw, U Street, Columbia Heights, Bloomingdale, Truxtun Circle, and parts of downtown DC. The updates I'm about to discuss come from recent meetings and actions taken by those commissions. Let me walk you through what's been happening. On the housing and density front, housing and land use issues dominated the agenda across these A&Cs this spring, and it's easy to see why. The DC 2050 Comprehensive Plan rewrite is actively underway, and commissioners are working to shape it. A&C 1B confirmed an upcoming meeting with the Office of Planning to begin coordinating their input, focused on structuring feedback and making sure community priorities around density and affordability are reflected in the final plan. The concern raised repeatedly that proposed future land use map updates don't go far enough on density, which limit the city's ability to produce the affordable housing it needs. On housing legislation, Ward 1 representatives reported on several active bills worth tracking. The One Front Door Act passed its first council reading unanimously and was headed for a final vote. The Housing Production Omnibus Bill is in hearings, and A&C 5E passed a resolution on future land use maps. Though not without debate, passing 4-1 with one abstention, which tells you this isn't a settled question, even at the neighborhood level. A&C 5E also passed a resolution supporting a new protected bike lane on Lincoln Road Northeast that preserves on-street parking between Franklin and Channing Streets, a signal that these neighborhoods want infrastructure investment without sacrificing neighborhood access. Separately, A&C 2C voted to send a letter to DDOT requesting an evaluation of the 11th Street bus priority lane near Massachusetts Avenue, where residents and businesses have flagged problems with curbside access for deliveries and drop-offs since the lane was installed. DDOT is also advancing plans for a safety redesign of the M Street Northwest corridor from Thomas Circle to 28th Street, including protected pedestrian spaces, improved bike lane connections, and updated signal timing. Construction is currently targeted for summer 2027. On economic development, A&C 1B has been tracking the proposed U Street Business Improvement District. Organizers gave commissioners an update in April, flagging ongoing challenges, retail vacancies, declining rents, and pressure on large property owners. The committee is aiming to bring a resolution in support of the bid, with the goal of advancing it to council. If you own or invest along the U Street corridor, this is worth watching closely. A functioning bid brings maintenance, programming, and a dedicated advocacy structure that directly supports commercial and residential values in the surrounding blocks. A few other items worth flagging. A&C 1B passed a resolution supporting local partnership in the stewardship of Meridian Hill and Malcolm X Park, one of the largest green spaces in Ward 1. The resolution, developed with Washington Parks and People and Friends of Meridian Hill, calls for a multi-party management model involving federal and DC governments alongside community organizations as the park approaches its 100th anniversary. Limited federal resources has been a persistent challenge. The resolution is designed to start the conversation with district agencies. Agency 1B also passed a resolution requesting that DDOT expand publicly accessible ADA parking spaces on neighborhood streets, proposing a guideline of roughly one ADA space for every 20 parking spaces. And over in ANC 5E, commissioners passed a resolution requesting brick sidewalk conversions in Bloomingdale and Truxton Circle, as well as a resolution requesting safety improvements at key intersections on 1st Street Northwest. Small items on paper, real quality of life signals on the ground. Bottom line, the agencies in 2001 are active. They're shaping housing policy, transportation, public safety, parks, and economic development all at the same time. If you own or invest here, these are the meetings worth following. And many of those discussions ultimately point to a bigger question. Where is 2001 headed next? To answer that, let's look at the projects, policies, and investments shaping the neighborhood's future. If you want to understand where 2001 is headed, you have to look at what's being built, what's being planned, and where public investment is being directed. And right now, there's a lot happening across the zip code. Let's start with the longer-term context. Between 2015 and 2025, 2001 added roughly 6,700 apartments across more than 30 developments, with much of that growth concentrated in Shaw, U Street, and Mount Vernon Square. This isn't a neighborhood that's just beginning to grow. It's a neighborhood that has been steadily evolving for more than a decade and continues to attract new investment. Looking ahead, several notable projects remain on radar. At 1200 5th Street Northwest, the former Mid-City financial site remains one of the largest long-term redevelopment opportunities in the zip code. Nearby, So Others Might Eat, or SOME, is advancing the Roberts Residences, an affordable housing community that reflects the kind of mission-driven development this neighborhood has historically supported. Plans have also been proposed for a large residential project at 450 5th Street Northwest that could bring several hundred additional housing units to the corridor. Together, these projects represent potential future housing growth across multiple price points and housing types. There's also ongoing planning activity around Mount Vernon Square designed to support future residential and commercial growth. Mount Vernon Square sits at one of the most strategically positioned intersections in the zip code, offering transit access, proximity to downtown, and a growing residential base surrounding it. How that planning effort unfolds will influence development patterns throughout the surrounding area. Infrastructure investment continues as well. DDOT is advancing the 11th Street Northwest Bike Lane project, which will convert existing bike lanes into curbside protected facilities to improve safety and connectivity along the corridor. The project is part of the district's broader effort to improve multimodal transportation options and support safer streets throughout the city. DDOT is also continuing citywide pavement, sidewalk, alley, and streetscape restoration projects that will gradually improve the public realm across downtown Washington. On the policy front, the biggest housing story in May came from Washington. The U.S. House passed the amended 21st Century Road to Housing Act, a bipartisan package focused on increasing housing production and modernizing federal housing programs. The legislation still requires Senate approval, but it reflects the continued national focus on housing supply and affordability changes that are also being felt here in D.C. For buyers, investors, residents, the story in 2001 isn't whether growth is happening. Growth has been underway for years. The bigger question is where the next phase of that growth lands and whether you're positioned ahead of it. New housing continues to be proposed, infrastructure is being upgraded, and investment continues flowing into a neighborhood that remains an important part of DC's growth story. Of course, growth isn't just measured in housing units and infrastructure projects. It's also reflected in the businesses, restaurants, and gathering places that give a neighborhood its identity. The food scene in 2001 continues to evolve, and a few recent openings are helping shape the neighborhood's next chapter. Techo Palma is one of Shaw's most notable new hospitality openings this spring, bringing a refreshed rooftop experience to the former El Techo space and adding new energy to one of the neighborhood's busiest corridors. Rosa's Diner opened in May, adding a Latin-inspired all-day dining concept to the mix, and EB's Corner Bar has quickly become one of the area's most talked-about destinations, earning a reputation for its neighborhood atmosphere, late-night food, and standout burger. Beyond the new arrivals, 2001 continues to be anchored by a strong lineup of established favorites. Oyster remains one of the district's premier dining destinations with its Michelin-starred approach to sustainable dining. Unconventional Diner continues to draw locals and visitors alike to Mount Vernon Triangle, while Ambar Shaw remains a neighborhood favorite known for its bulk and small plates and unlimited dining experience. You also find long-time gathering places like Shaw's Tavern alongside newer, critically acclaimed additions such as Bon May, reflecting the mix of established institutions and emerging concepts that defines the neighborhood today. Taken together, that's one of the strengths of 2001. You can eat a Michelin-starred tasting menu, a neighborhood tavern, a rooftop cocktail spot, and a late-night burger, all within a few blocks of one another. That variety contributes to the quality of life residents enjoy and helps reinforce the neighborhood's long-term appeal for both renters and homeowners. And in many ways, that brings us back to the bigger picture. Let me leave you with this. 2001 is a neighborhood that continues to evolve. The market is showing signs of greater balance, with buyers gaining more choices while demand remains healthy. New housing is still being proposed, infrastructure projects continue moving forward, and neighborhood stakeholders remain actively engaged in shaping what comes next. And at the same time, the things that make 2001 attractive haven't changed. Walkability, transit access, historic housing stock, strong restaurants, active commercial corridors, and a location that keeps residents connected to the rest of the city. That's why understanding the neighborhood requires more than just looking at home prices. You have to understand what's being built, what's being debated, and what people actually experience when they live there. Whether you're buying, selling, investing, or simply trying to stay informed, remember, preparation over prediction. That's what I'm here for. If you're thinking about making a move in DC, reach out. I'm Eddie Calloway, and I'm happy to help. Until next time, build smart, brick by brick.